Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back with another live stream of video game news for Monday, October 14th. My third attempt today to actually get streaming going here, trying to figure out whether or not there's anything I can do at all to get the amount of data going through to YouTube to be acceptable and not drop frames. And we'll have to wait 30 seconds to see how that goes. It does seem like so far so good in that case. So I haven't updated OBS or anything like recently, so I don't know why it would have changed, but clearly something did change here. As far as the streaming, and I guess the only thing I can take from that is I'll keep an eye on it for the rest of today's stream and the next couple streams, and I'm just going to keep everything the same. Just give up on Twitch. Twitch was never going anywhere anyways, and yeah, just focus exclusively on having good live streams on YouTube, at least. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah. The weirdest scenario, and it's almost certainly not the case, would be something with my new doorbells, and no, it can't be that though, because the new doorbells I have aren't even plugged in at the moment. My old new doorbell that I got about a month ago and I'm sending back has failed twice today to ring loud enough in such a way that I could actually hear it. So yeah, the doorbell needs to work. Although my new doorbells also have some programming issues that certainly are crazy, in that you can only have 32 images in the video slideshow mode, and you can't do the video slideshow mode while it has motion sensing detection turned on that specific intercom screen, which screams to me that they are incredibly weak chips as far as CPU/GPU, although technically in this case I imagine it's pretty much the same chip doing the visuals and the graphics. On top of which, it's also weird in that the new doorbell has misspelled Monday because it's Chinese programmers, and so instead of typing in Monday on the calendar, it says monitor, MONITER. I'm like, oh, that's just crazy. There is also, I think, just a general instability of its programming, that if you change too many settings or change the wrong settings, or if you corrupt the SD card, which is using FAT format instead of ext format, I guess would be the better format, or exFAT would be the, I guess, more connected new standard to use. But yeah, all kinds of weirdness. I did reread the instructions and find out that the photos are supposed to be in JPEG mode for it to be a digital picture frame, and at 1020 by 600. I've went through 32 photos and cropped them so they would fit. Most of the photos I have, though, are portrait mode, not widescreen landscape mode. And still, even at that, though, it just doesn't work after 32. Which, almost certainly, that's a programming issue, in that what they were trying to write in the code was that it should have pulled a list of 2 to the power of 32, a 32-bit integer, positive integer, which would have been a massive amount of files, and probably right in standard with the maximum number of files that you can have in on a file allocation table style formatted micro SD card. But instead they lost the 2 to the power of 32. The only way you get 32 as the maximum integer otherwise is if you were creating your own typeset of a binary integer, because like an 8-bit integer even should get you 0 to 255, so 256 total possibilities to make a array that would be a list of file names in it. Even if you somehow did a short integer as a type def, depending on whether it's a 32-bit system or a 64-bit system, then yeah, a short integer really should still just be 8 bits. It's kind of crazy that you would be able to declare a type that was only 4 bits, which 2, 4, 8, 16, 2 to the power of 4. Yeah. Yeah, might be 32. But yeah, it almost certainly is just bad programming. Also, it has nothing to do with video games. And I think that probably just highlights how little I've done as far as playing video games or getting back to Punch Club. I am popping in and out of Punch Club, certainly. But I still have a lot of this remodeling stuff just distracting me. There's something weird about this list I'm noticing. Also on SteamDB here, there seems to be just like different pictures. Throne and Liberty is higher. Metaphor Refantasio's numbers are very high. Have we finally gotten to a point where we're starting to see new games pop up? And if that is the case, how many weeks will it be before those new games started showing up in my chart? That is certainly going to be part of the argument of retiring some games, even things like The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, for instance, in that those are just going to be games people play all of the time. And so, yeah, either people or bots are going to play Counter-Strike 2 is the #1 example of that. So yeah, as far as my charts go, having run my macro twice today, Black Myth Wukong has finally gone low enough to be in 4th spot, and almost certainly the newest game on this chart is still going to be Deadlock. Yeah. There might very well be a lagging issue here, in that new games popping up may feel very relevant, but because this chart is charting over time, games like Counter-Strike 2, which are always being played, will just drown out. And yes, that is a problem as far as what I want to highlight, but it isn't actually a inaccurate representation of what really does happen in the gaming industry. Is that there is a much larger group of gamers out there, if we really are going to call gamers a group in any real definition, since they're so varied. But there is a portion of gamers out there that definitely are just playing Counter-Strike 2 all the time, and they are skewing the numbers up for things like Counter-Strike 2, and they aren't really focusing on or playing on any other games. I imagine things like the National Football League have similar situations, sports games in general, where maybe in the UK you see a lot more people watching whatever soccer game is being played, but a lot of people in the United States only watch NFL games if their team is on. Of course, there's also a lot of people that have 2 or 3 teams that they bounce around with. They have their main team and then they have some backups so that they are always capable of watching something on the weekends when there's a football game. Or they even bounce over to something like basketball or baseball. The Steam Next Fest has been announced, although noticeably it is not. Well, nope, I just needed to reload. I was like, it's not being promoted. These next fests are coming fairly quickly, but apparently they are free to do. They give Steam something new to do for the very small number of people like me who are going to the Steam front page on a frequent basis. Go ahead and just open this in a new tab. Yeah, there's something still wrong with my macro in that it's closing tabs and closing things, so I ran it the first time, and then the second time I disabled all the closes, all the points where it would have closed something. Here you can see Metaphor ReFantasio is being rated very positively, 92%. Starship's Trooper Exterminations being rated very positive too. That's gonna potentially bite into the success of Helldivers, which this might be one of the rare occasions where somebody sees that a parody of Starship Troopers, which is a parody itself of other things, would justify making an official game of that style to compete with it. Even though I imagine over a long enough period of time there might be more people happy and still playing Helldivers just because they got there first. Yep. So yeah, over the past couple of over the weekend, let's see, I assembled a bookshelf, which turned out to be damaged in shipping, the wrong color vinyl, and the wrong height. And then, in nearly dying, just physically exhausting myself to put this bookshelf together, which you really should not be so unhealthy that you're exhausted putting a bookshelf together, particularly the kinds of bookshelves you would buy these days, which are not solid wood and not particularly heavy components. So I started the process of saying send it back to Amazon.com, and they said we'll just give you a partial refund of $40 if you just keep it. And I'm like, whatever, you know what, that's probably better than having to disassemble the whole thing. Of course, it was stupid of me, and what I should have done, in 2 things I should have done. One, since I'm trying to match bookshelves that I already had, I should have bought all the bookshelves I was going to buy from the same brand, same manufacturer, all at the same time. So because you have a high chance that you won't be able to find them years later, which is very much the case with me. 2, I should have logged what the color was expressed as far as the vinyl, the fake veneer wood, and the model number, and the manufacturer, and the brand, and all of that too. You should just tip for when you start buying furniture, which you should do only after you've been in a house really for a couple years. Like, at a certain point, it's probably right about the time when you think about, do I want to have a baby after getting married or not getting married, it doesn't matter if you're married or not, about that time when you moved into a permanent house or a semi-permanent house, you're getting settled in life, you're thinking, do I want to get a dog, do I want to get a baby? That's probably the time to start thinking about furniture and saying, well, I can't afford furniture at that, so let's push it off even more. Yes, you're going to get cheaper pieces that aren't going to last and that you're going to just throw away instead of bothering to move. And that's a great way to live potentially your entire life, is just cheap bookshelves and things and not going super fancy. Most people don't really care for fancy furniture, and unless you're buying 100-year-old antique furniture, it's not good quality stuff anyways, unless you built it yourself and you actually know what you're doing. But yeah, I should have logged it when I first got it, and then the other mistake I made is, as soon as I saw the box, it seemed a little short to me. I should have just gone and gotten a measuring tape and measured the longest piece of wood, and then I would have very quickly found that it was a 60-inch shelf, and all the other shelves I have are 71.5, 72 inches tall, which, yeah, that's a big difference. It's not the worst case scenario. I do have some taller things that would benefit from having that extra room, and going 60-inch shelves, if you have taller things that you're going to put on the top of the bookshelves, if it was consistent, isn't a terrible thought. But in my mind, I just cannot imagine, even if you stair-stepped bookshelves and you had a 72-inch 5-shelf bookshelf and then a 60-inch 5-shelf bookshelf and then a 4-shelf bookshelf and a 3-shelf bookshelf and a 2-shelf bookshelf, and you just stair-stepped it that way down, if you had that much width against the wall, even that I don't think would look particularly good as far as decorating. And every bookshelf I've ever seen has always been the exact same height. It just seems like that is the right way to do it and the standard way to do it. So yeah, then I had a delivery as part of the remodel I'm dealing with, and the delivery man made me help him carry out flooring components, and nearly died doing that. 100 pounds. He said it was 100 pounds, and yeah, it very possibly was. So yeah, as far as the Steam Fest there, they are just demos, in case you're not aware. Demos for new games, for games I don't recognize or know anything about. So it's kind of hard to get enthused about them, particularly in my case where I'm just struggling to play the games I have at this point and find time to play games at all. So yeah, I have that concern that I may just not buy any more games for a long time, which is not a terrible concern that they have. Otherwise, it's not a terrible situation to be in. My bigger concern is that I'm just not going to play video games at all, and that I'm going to keep getting drawn into doing these side projects, and eventually I'm just going to fall over with a heart attack doing one of these side projects, or I'm going to get stuck into some kind of working a job scenario where it's going to suck the life out of me, and I'll be working 10 hours, 12 hours a day, or I'll be working even 8 hours a day and then having to come home and sleep for the other 16 hours. And then there's just that constant churn and cycle. It's kind of crazy how I was looking at a Reddit subreddit, and it occurred to me, it's just how crazy people think that they're okay with working and overworking themselves. The hypothetical situation there was you have to work as a janitor for 12 hours a day. I don't think it was every day. Let's assume it wasn't every day, but 5 days a week. So 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're talking 60 hours a week. Instead of your more average 40 hours a week, which in reality, most jobs, you don't need to even be there 40 hours. But yeah, 60 hours a week as a janitor. You can't be fired unless you don't show up. You can't be laid off. You're kind of guaranteed a job unless you stop doing the job. But you start that first year with an annual salary of $10,000, and then every subsequent year the salary that you have doubles, which at a certain point it is definitely a gambler's dream or fallacy, but it's not really practical, not realistic that would ever happen. But yeah, you would more than likely starve to death in the first year living off $10,000. They included free meals and things like that to just make it somewhat balanced. This is definitely some theory crafting happening. But yeah, sure, by 10, 20, 30 years, you might have $1 million, but amount doubling. But the amount of struggle just to get there, by the 5th year, you would only be at, let's see, 20 the 2nd year, 40 the 3rd year. So by the 3rd year, you're barely getting a livable wage. So you've starved to death or struggled for 3 years. Maybe if you did this while you were living with your parents, that might make some sense. But also you're being a janitor for the rest of your life there. So by the 4th year, you're getting $80,000 a year, which is a pretty decent amount. By the 5th year, you're getting $160,000 a year. You've then, at that point, been working 60 hours a week, though, for 5 years. Nobody's going to be able to or want to retire at that 5-year point, which is about the point where most people tend to want to move their jobs around. Roughly, in my opinion, I'm going to say that's an opinion or guess more than any real evidence behind it. But yeah, about 5 years, people start getting tired with the job, depending on the job and how much it changes. But yeah, 6th year, you get $160,000. Okay, by the 5th year and 6th year, you should have been able to buy a nice house. By the 7th year, you're gonna have $320,000 as your annual salary. So by that time, you probably could have paid off a fairly nice house. So you're good there. You at some point would have probably also gotten a car, maybe. In modern times, maybe not so much. By the next year, you're at $720,000. That's a nice nest egg at that point. You've already paid off a house by the 8th year, I believe we're up to, and you've got a nice nest egg, but not enough to really live off of. So you go then another year, and you're at $1.5 million. Now you've got a almost life has set you situation. Like you're set pretty well there. And by that 9th year, 1.5 million, as long as you're not going crazy and spending it, put into just a retirement account, might set you very nicely. So we'll go up to the 10th year and say you get to 3 million in 10 years on top of that, as far as your annual salary. It's not a terrible thought, except for the fact that for the first 4 years and 5 years, really, you're living horribly and you really probably would quit the job before you got anywhere. You probably could never take that kind of job. Also, it's just not realistic that this would ever happen. But that was a long explanation of a scenario I saw on Reddit. Instead of talking about video game news, I'm certainly rambling here. Just to point out how many people said they would keep on going forever. That they would just fall into the double down on a good winning hand mentality of gambling. And that they would just want to become billionaires, even though that really doesn't mean much either. But yep, how many people were completely ignoring just how much in hours, even if it's a easy janitor job. The difference there is what kind of janitor job. A janitor job, I imagine, in a bustling high school with 3,000 kids every day is probably a lot more work and a lot dirtier than being a janitor in an office that has maybe 100 people in it. That certainly could be it. You could be working 6 hours or 60 hours a week, but you might be sitting around doing nothing, or just standing around and taking smoke breaks and sweeping, things like that. But those hours certainly would still kill you. Like that is just way too many hours. And I uniquely have that experience because I did work a job for 5 years that had incredibly large amounts of forced overtime and incredible amounts of just hours and schedule issues, and just never had any time. And I can personally testify to it. It is not worth it. It will break you physically, it will break you mentally. And sure, if my salary had started off at where it started off before and doubled every year for the 5 years I worked that job, then I would be a very rich person, certainly, but that's not realistically what happened. I got small, almost insignificant raises for the first couple years, kind of a big raise, I believe, after the 2 year being in there for 2 years, and then about average raises every year after that. But you're not talking doubling, not 200% raises, you're talking 10, 20, maybe if you got lucky you got a 30% raise one year, but probably not anywhere close to that. And I can say many years now, after working that job for 5 years and putting all that energy into it, and even at the time realizing it was sucking up all my life, I just had no social life. I was not playing any video games, I was not talking to friends, I was not talking to family, I was not, didn't have free time to even go to a doctor as far as health, or anything like that. And even eating healthy would have been something that would took too much time. I was just working a job, then going home and sleeping, and then waking up the next day and working the job again. I can tell you it definitely wasn't worth it. What I lost in revenue from just not being able to expand or get promotions or move to other jobs because I was so burnt out from that job was way more than what I ever earned from working that job. But what can I say? I was young and dumb. But I do want to warn people, and this is a long way to say this. Yeah, don't devalue your time. Most people devalue their time way too much. Like, when in reality, it should be worth a lot more. So time is the one thing you can't get back, is the saying. Anyways, that was a big ramp. Seems to me that none of the game developer. Video Games Chronicles articles open, so I'm just gonna right click and use a plugin to open up all of those tabs and close that. And then we'll go through all the stories and headlines, and we should go through these fairly quickly. I should is what I mean to say there. I did some tweaking also, so I'll keep an eye out to see if any more tweaking needs to happen. There's still room, I suppose, to make the font bigger, but sometimes it doesn't always fit. I'm seeing a lot more people talk about Metaphor ReFantagio on YouTube than I have other Japanese games in the past, so it seems like every time we get a new franchise of JRPGs, that opens the door to more a newer audience potentially, and I do think that gamers perhaps are certainly starved for new content, so Metaphor ReFantagio may be very well situated in the perfect release window, having sold 100 million units in the first day. Let's see, some of these are probably things we already talked about. The Tomb Raider 4 through 6 remastered being announced, launching in February. 1 through 3 was released earlier this year. I don't imagine that the engines are actually that different from number 1 all the way to 6, considering how rapidly the games were developed. And the Tomb Raider series is perhaps a good example of what happens when you overdevelop and make too many sequels too fast, in that almost nothing happened. You kind of can do that. The quality certainly went down. I imagine the sales numbers went down. They probably didn't make their same amount of profit with each release. There's certainly something to be argued that maybe the sales numbers of Tomb Raiders 1 through 3 established the idea that video games should be trilogies always and never try to be quadrilogies or just game and sequel. I think at this point, game and sequel is about the best you should target when developing games, and then you should probably be thinking that each game is going to be its own independent game and not really part of any kind of connecting story. And if the 6 Tomb Raider games were more like that, well, I think they kind of are. Like, yes, you have Lara Croft, but I think it is probably more of a case that you could play any one of the Tomb Raider games and not really need to have played the previous ones. There's big advertising problems, certainly, around Lara Croft and Tomb Raider 2 that I imagine eventually caused enough controversy to lose them some sales. But yeah, I've heard a couple of YouTubers also express that there's just not likely to be a lot of enthusiasm for these Tomb Raider games as much as the remakes of 1 and 2 and 3. Apparently Video Games Chronicles has an exclusive. It has a first look at a Lowen Doug Trio illustration rare from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet TCG Surging Sparks. So these are for cards. These are, yeah, the Pokemon cards. Not really video game related there. Let's see. Sakurai ends his YouTube channel with a tribute to Satoru Iwata. Let's see. Mr. Iwata was truly the person who understood me best. Now, I'd have to remind myself, Sakurai is the Smash Brothers creator. Satoru Iwata was the late Nintendo president. Interesting. Okay, I suppose that is a touching way to end your YouTube channel, that you're done making YouTube videos on, instead of so many other YouTubers who get their channels either deleted or end it in some kind of controversy. And it is a nice thought, certainly. It definitely makes me think, if I was going to end my YouTube channel, which I shouldn't dare even say those words out loud, who would I make a tribute to, or how could I end it in a nice way? Yeah, I don't know, really. I don't think there really would be much. At most, I'd probably just come around full circle and play more Binding of Isaac. That was the first game I tried to stream on, and so just go full circle and go back to Binding of Isaac. Plus, I've come back and played Binding of Isaac quite a bit in between. But yeah, it's not likely he said anything important here. Let's move on then. Epic says Fortnite's Rocket Racing is ending its themed updates. The Psyonix developed game launched less than a year ago. I would assume that means it's not succeeding particularly well. Astrobot has outperformed virtually every non-Mario platformer in a decade in Europe. Let's see, the PS5 exclusive outsold Sonic and Crash titles. That is perhaps more of a damning statement on platformers in general, in that you have Nintendo platformers which sell very well and usually are almost always exclusively very good, Mario platformers in particular. And then you have Sonic being considered a platforming game when most Sonic games I really wouldn't call a pure platforming game, as much as it is a 2D racing game with some jumping, and Crash titles, which also doesn't really have the smell of a standard platforming game or 2D platforming game either, because of its perspectives that the Crash games have from the behind the back angle. This also perhaps shows that there is a very high demand, I think there always has been, for kid-friendly platformers on PlayStation, and that Sony has just done a terrible job trying to create or promote the construction of those games. Let's see. Game Freaks has acknowledged a massive Pokemon data breach as employee info appears online. Current, former, and contract employees have been affected, seemingly not anybody else, or not just kids who play Pokemon games. Which in reality, why would Game Freak even have the data of kids who had played Pokemon games? Because maybe you would sign in with a Nintendo account, and maybe Nintendo then would have the personally identifiable information of kids playing Pokemon games, but Nintendo really shouldn't share and wouldn't share that information with Game Freak, even if they are a major holder of Game Freak. It's probably past the point where Game Freak should also change their name. It's not that helpful. Steam has updated their website proactively to warn players that they're only buying a license to a game at checkout. California recently signed a new consumer protection law around digital purchases. Here you have it. This picture would have been better if they had kind of circled the part you're supposed to look at. I'm looking all over here trying to figure out where the warning is. The purchase of a digital product grants a license for the product on Steam. For full terms and conditions, please see the Steam subscriber agreement. So yeah. There are, I hear, a few games on Steam that actually don't require the Steam client at all. So if you buy it on Steam, if you installed it, then uninstalled Steam and unplugged your computer from the internet, you could still play those games. None of this really matters, though. I saw people on Reddit saying, well, this is the beginning of a new age of piracy. I'm not sure if people can get away with piracy as much as they could in the old days without getting caught as far as video games go, particularly since so many video games are now online or have DRM installed on them, although a pirated version would almost certainly be a cracked version that removed the DRM. But I just don't see that happening. Steam is still extremely convenient, and Steam has yet to do anything to really revoke people's access to games, except for in the situations of cheating with the VAC bans, which, as long as you're not cheating, which is perhaps something they should promote more of, is just every time you launch a Steam client, they should pop up something saying, remember, no cheating. Cheating's not allowed. Cheating may result in your account being banned and you losing access to an individual game or your entire account in some situations. Of course, that causes a lot of consternation too. The mobile game I'm playing, Memento Mori, put out a notice that they had banned several accounts that had apparently found some way to get the premium currency cheating in a cheating way without actually giving money to the developers, and those accounts got banned, and that was kind of shocking, I think, to the community in general, as far as people going, what did these people do specifically to get banned, so I know I'm not going to get banned. And certainly in Memento Mori, since it is player versus player, somebody cheating by getting premium currency, and it is cheating the entire community's experience, although it also is cheating the community's experience in the fact that a whale can legitimately just pay money to win, but in most games like that, you just have to ignore the whales and know you're never going to be in the top tier of players if you don't spend any money, if you're just going to stay a free-to-play player. I, as far as mobile games go, have deleted the Disney Pixels Mickey Mouse Pixel game. It looked awful. You ran out of energy fairly quickly, and just there was no reason that you would ever have any fun with it. It seems like, even if you were a Disney fan, I don't know who would have been a pixelated version of fan of Mickey Mouse's, and there are multiple Mickey Mouses that have different traits like DJ Mickey and Steamboat Willie Mickey and Fantasia Mickey type characters. There really weren't even that many characters to it. It's just like, why would you want this ugly, low effort Kingdom Hearts kind of rip-off game? As a gacha game, it had no interesting audio and no interesting video, and way worse than even the Cardcaptor Sakura game, which the Cardcaptor Sakura game servers were apparently down for the whole weekend, so couldn't even jump back into it to try to play it a little bit more, to still kind of hate on it. At the very least, the Cardcaptor Sakura game has put effort into making their game look visually interesting, but none of it really holds up to the now defunct Destiny's Child first mobile game from Shift Up, which I launched the memorial version of that and just looked at all the gacha anime waifu girls that I collected in that, and it's just like, this visually just looks so much better. It's just so much more interesting. They put way more effort in animating things using live 2D to make the animations look like they're moving and alive, even though they're kind of just swaying back and forth. The story was existent and pretty good compared to every other mobile game. the state of Android gaming and mobile gaming in general is still very much in a terrible state. It's garbage games for the most part. It's no surprise that people tend to stick to the biggest, most well-known games like Genshin Impact, because those are the only ones that are going to potentially make enough money. But then there's also just the microtransaction nonsense that is in almost every single good game on mobile that still makes it a horrible experience. We don't care about the Video Game Chronicles Patreon, although it does seem like they may be more and more just getting desperate for attention / money. Gigantamax Pokemon are officially joining Pokemon Go this month. Okay, I don't know what Gigantamax really is. And then Tron Catalyst is a new isometric action game from BitHell Games. It's coming to consoles and PC in 2025. BitHell is also probably a bad name for a company. I assume it's BitHell and not Bithell. But yeah. That brings us to the Gamatsu stories. Let's go through these. Bleach Rebirth of Souls character trailer for Soifon. The Bleach Thousand Year Blood arc is starting to show new episodes again on Hulu, and it's still very much a case where the episodes are really short and repetitive and just overall disappointing. They're telling the epic conclusion of Bleach as depicted, I think, or closer to what was depicted in the manga when the manga was completed, and yet they're still not really giving it an appropriate level of polish. Certainly isn't going to encourage people to go back and watch the Thousand Years Blood arc over again a second time. RoboQuest is coming to the PS4 and 5 in the first half of 2025. I assume that's a first-person shooter game. Yes, it is. You can see it's rated very positively. Is it player versus player? No, it's single player. Interesting. So I can go ahead and put that on the wish list. The Stone of Madness launches January 28th, 2025, with the PC demo being available today. I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually a lot of games that are going to be mentioned on Gamatsu that have demos releasing because of the Steam Next Fest. Yep. The Next Fests do make some sense in that what I try to do in these live streams when I'm not rambling and getting distracted like crazy is to promote and show new games and just educate myself and others as far as what the new games are coming out. The Next Fest is doing a curated version of that, certainly, by getting specific people to agree to release demos and be involved in the fest. And so it is a much smaller subset than the random Steam Direct games that get released on a daily basis on Steam. But it certainly is the same goal in mind. Let's get gamers excited and hyped up about games that are going to come out and show them something new. This Stone of Madness definitely looks like something new. I kind of thought it was going to be a point-and-click adventure, but apparently it's a real-time strategy game. We talked about Tron. Here's some screenshots of what it looks like, which is not particularly visually appealing. The whole visuals of Tron with the neon glowing, and I imagine it was a lot of neon paint under black lights for the original Tron movie was perhaps interesting, but even then the original Tron movie graphics were very much first generation experiments of things that had never been done before. The fact that the visuals really haven't been able to evolve any, it's kind of a shame. And when you look at this, it just looks ridiculous. You just got orange and light blue everywhere. Toads of the Bayou has been delayed to November 19th. Neo Harbor Rescue Squad launches November 12th. Paramedic Action Drama Minigame Collection. Interesting. So, kind of a take on what would you do if you made a WarioWare game that wasn't so silly and irreverent and actually had a theme on it. That could work. Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake Side Quest gameplay is available on Gematsu. 8-bit action adventure game Lovish has been announced for PC. Yep. That doesn't look like something I would really put my attention to. Monarch Team has begun development on a new school RPG. Interesting. New school as a phrase probably exists, but I'm not sure many people would ever use it. Oh, it's probably not new dash school. It's probably new comma school RPG. Introducing Furu's Team Noir. Yeah. This is a RPG set in a school, like Persona, is what it is. Not the idea of new school versus old school. We are really at a point, though, where a generational divide should be drawn, in that there have been several generations of old school style games, old school RPGs, that it's time for them to be rethought and become something more complicated. Nowadays, most games are not generally just described as RPGs. Anyways, they're usually some other kind of game with RPG game mechanics. A shooter with RPG game mechanics or something like that. Venus Vacation Prism Dead or Alive Extreme has added Elise. I assume that's who being added here, and we'll see if the body style of Elise is following the body styles of the two previous characters, which it seems like that is the case. Big busts, very, very large busts, and fairly large hips. So yeah, there's a level of consistency here that I don't know if I can really agree with. Seems like perhaps this is an artist that has a fetish and he is taking it too far in that he has drawn the first three, or the main character designer has dictated the first three characters look exactly the same as far as the bust to hip to butt weight ratio. Bust to waist to hip ratio is usually how that's measured. I first speculated when they introduced this first character that this might be a case of them saying, well, we can't draw any characters that are flat-chested for the fear of somebody claiming that they look underage. So maybe they did overreact to that in particular, but I think it's just getting kind of downright repetitive. Yeah, having three different ladies that just basically are head swaps, different hairstyles, and then exact same body models. That's only going to appeal to certain people that only want that body type. And there should be a little bit of variety in there. and it doesn't seem like we're going to get that. So increasingly, we know they're going to announce 8 characters. If there are 5 more characters and they all are in that exact same body type, that's going to be annoying, increasingly boring. This week's Japanese game releases include Super Mario Party Jamboree, Professional Baseball Spirit 2024 through 2025. Interesting how the game is splitting the year there. Yep, several other digital games. Phantom Thief Angels, Twin Angel, Labyrinth of Time and World, Relight has been announced for PC. I'd assume this is a re-release of something. Yeah, it's a remastered version of a 2011 PSP visual novel. Yeah. Here you have a 2011 older anime game, and here you can see there is at least more of a variety in the bust to waist to hip ratio between these two characters. And so regressive really is about the only thing I can say is happening now as far as censorship and the efforts of self-censorship that have been pushed onto Japanese creators. In the end, it's going to make things with anime styles just feel childish, even if it's not for children, and boring and cartoon-like. Yeah. The cartoon analogy, I think, is about the best analogy. Cartoons are bright and colorful and exciting when you start watching them as little kids. But if you've been watching cartoons for 10 years, so you start at, let's say, 4 years old, and you've been watching them for 10 years, by the time you get to 14, 15 years old, cartoons are going to feel a little dull, and you're going to seek out something different. Yeah, and maybe you'll come back to cartoons when you're older, but that doesn't have anything to do with the point I was trying to make there, which I don't know if I really did make it. Anton Blast has been delayed to December 3rd. We're seeing decent amounts of delays again. Forgotten Memories Remastered Edition launches October 28th for the Switch, iOS, and Android. It is a 2015 release survival horror game. I don't recall this game. Perhaps because it was only on mobile? Yeah. I would have thought that this imagery at least would have caught my eye. This throne of dolls. Wonder how this game actually plays, though. As far as if it's an Android game, is this mostly just a dialogue based experience? No, doesn't look like it. I do recall seeing a game somewhat like this. Maybe it's the same game. It does kind of have that whole Silent Hill element to it. So, did this game ever come out on Steam? Apparently not, and apparently it's still not. So it is kind of crazy that we've potentially hit a point here where you can make an Android game, a mobile game, and then remaster it for modern mobile games, and look a lot better. This trailer just keeps ending and starting over and over again. It's not looping. Interesting game that I may never really be able to play. Yeah, I'm not sure that I could get the Steam Deck to play it via Android, Waydroid emulation, and then record the footage. And I guess that's how I would capture mobile game footage if I was going to play a game on an Android game. It is extremely rare, though, that a game gets announced and is not available for PC eventually. I haven't played a horror game in quite a long time, though. I probably should. I should always say some when in these kinds of headlines. Some of the former Disco Elysium developers have established an art collective / RPG studio called Summer Eternal. Today's third Disco Elysium's staff offshoot. So apparently Disco Elysium just collapsed and different people went in different directions. Related articles. You don't see these very often. Psychogeographic. Another company called Longdew. And another company called Dark Math Games. Terrifier arcade game. Interesting. I want to see that story. Side-scroller beat-em-up Terrifier the arcade game announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Maybe we did talk about this. I've only seen the first Terrifier movie. Haven't gotten around to seeing 2, and I think I heard there was a 3 being announced. And didn't see anybody with a messed up face like that in the first one. This is frankly just downright pathetic, though, as far as what you would do with what is probably the most brutal, gory horror movie in a while. It's just to make a beat 'em up game around it. And then this thumbnail certainly isn't showing you an accurate depiction of what the game looks like. Alright, that's going to bring us to gaming on Linux. Streets of Rogue 2 delayed again, but a demo is out now. Daily Dungeon gives you a fresh dungeon puzzle every day. It's inspired by Wordle, which I can't imagine that a dungeon puzzle is going to be that interesting as Wordle. Although Wordle really only takes at most 5 minutes. I could see this taking usually less than a minute, unless there's some major tricks on that. I'd also say that the Wordle concept of limiting people to one puzzle a day wasn't a particularly good concept, and once New York Times got purchased Wordle, having previous Wordles locked behind their subscription felt extremely money grabbing. If something like Wordle was going to work, it would have to be an anagram game that lets you make your own anagrams and just keep on doing it. But then there would be the puzzle of the day that would pop up when you first launched it every day to just elevate that first puzzle of the day, but then allow for more gameplay. But yeah, you don't want to limit your players. That's when it gets super annoying. There is a point where you can have stamina systems and limit them after they've been playing for an hour a day or so, but you don't want to start limiting players after just a few minutes. Some Madcap Mayhem and Classics from SNEG are in 2 humble bundles, according to Gaming on Linux. Here we can see the whole lists of games. OBS Studio 31.0.0 Beta 1 released, bringing multiple new features, adding NVIDIA blur filter and NVIDIA background blur, preview scroll bars and zoom and scale indicators. Let's see, preview scroll bars, don't see any there. Added version 210 format for AJA device capture, I don't know what that is. Added Amazon IVS service integration, don't know what that is. Added QSV AV1 screen content coding, don't know what that is. And they added first party YouTube chat features, which that might be helpful. So yeah, I probably should double check once version 31 comes out of OBS just to see if I'm installed, I'm on the oldest version before that, because that's what I'd like to be. Is I'd like to be in the last version before a major version change, unless they come out with some major new features, which that doesn't sound like anything that would help me or be useful for me. Mini Royale is a battle royale with toy soldiers and fun game modes. Tuxedo reveals Stellaris 16 Gen 6, a more compact desktop replacement laptop. This is hardware. We don't talk about hardware much. Slimbook reveals a new powerful AMD powered Evo Ultrabook. Mindtest has broken the chains of being a Minecraft clone with a new name called Luanti. Still very much looks like a Minecraft game to me, though. If that is actually the screenshot, it says Boxy Libre. That's what's being pictured there. Let's move on. An open source theme hospital engine called Core6TH version 0.68.0 is out now. Theme Hospital, I think, is the first of the theme games that came out a long time ago, not the more recent hospital game. SteamOS 3.6.18 beta released. Still not quite the true end of line, which 3.6.18 end of line was supposed to be the end of line. This beta is called the color at the end of the line. They're trying to be silly here with the names, I guess. Seems like in general it fixed just some crashes. And that's about it. They're just doing bug fixes until they get to the next minor number, 3.7. I talked about the license pop-up. So I did hear, I think I read this article in particular, the story deeper, more details, only a little bit more details though, of what happened here with non-Steam launcher script getting booted from the Steam Deck plugin store, Decky Loader, which is not an official Steam Deck or Valve plugin store by any means. There was some changes happening to Decky Loader in particular, and it felt like maybe they were trying to get rid of non-Steam launchers just to kind of clean up their appearance or open up the way for them to launch something of their own. But instead, it seems like what the story is that Roy, the developer of non-Steam Deck launchers, was banned and kicked from interacting with the Decky store over what the people who run the Decky store say were some offensive tweets or comments he made, and so that they're effectively cancel culturing him. Now, is it a justified cancel culture attempt? I don't know. Like, you never really know unless you can see a lot of the receipts, which never really get shown. You never get the details here. But yeah, without getting into the mud and wasting time and energy thinking about it, the people who run the Decky Loader and don't like Roy, and as such, they don't like Roy enough to ban him and the non-Steam Deck launchers from their storefront. Now, I don't understand still Roy's reaction there, but I can kind of understand that he may just be hurt and upset and not really understand what's going on, but his reaction very much at first comment was to say, I'm just giving up on the scripts, when there's really just no reason why he needs to give up on these scripts at all. Like, I think you would have just as many people willing to go to GitHub and download non-Steam Deck launcher script directly as there were people who were getting it through the Decky store. As far as I can tell, my speculation about Steam Deck launchers maybe costing something on the Decky store was completely wrong. We'll admit that. And yeah, all you really have is a comment here that they had that he was on subreddits, statements on Steam Deck related subreddits from its creator in a report that appears to show continued harassment of members of those communities. And then they say they also discovered harassment from the creator on their own server. So they don't like him. No, they're not giving any receipts. Roy was asked what was going on, and he says, I don't believe I said anything racist or wrong to anyone regarding race or color or bigotry. So this does seem like somebody took offense on race in particular, or at least that's what he thinks. I still don't really know what I did wrong for my plugin to be taken away so fast, but I just want to apologize to the Steam Deck community for causing any sort of drama and for failing them as a developer. Unfortunately, I don't know what has transpired, and I'm obviously not wanted in their environment, so he doesn't seem to really know, or at least he's doing a very good job of pretending like he doesn't know what the deal is. But yeah, there's always drama when it comes to programmers and the gaming community, more than there really should be. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird that any of this should ever happen. It probably highlights that if you're going to run something like the Decky store, the Decky Loader, you probably should have more closed forums. Maybe there should be a little bit less open discussion. Or if you're going to have open discussion, there should have been a lot more moderation. It does seem like where they failed in particular is that they didn't give warnings. They haven't given bans. If there was one single incident that had been caught, then there should have been a warning. After that warning, then there should have been like 2-week bans, things like that, things that would have led up to the point of a full ban. To go nuclear on your first administrative moderative action is not good moderation in general. And in most cases, my experience around forums and communications between developers, if somebody just doesn't care about what you're saying or doesn't like what you're saying, they tend not to stay around, and they tend to go quiet and just stop responding to you. And yes, I can understand a knee-jerk reaction to want to just harass people so that they'll actually respond to your comments, but that's never worked on the internet anywhere, and it's obviously not the right thing to do, and I don't think that's the case at all. Moving on, a Comedy 2.5 puzzle platformer called Arai Buck2 and the Anytime Elevator has a demo and a new trailer. That sounds like a weird game. I wonder where Gaming on Linux gets its articles from, because it seems to be not getting it from the same sources that I usually follow, which is good for me. Zephon from the developers of Warhammer 40k Gladius releases November 8th. Tomb Raider Remastered we already talked about. Let's see, Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles coming to PC in 2025. We talked about that. Talked about that. Talked about that. Talked about that. And that. And the Steam Deck officially came to Australia. They also said in an interview that they're continuing to try and improve battery life, and that is still being trickled down to even the Steam Deck LCD versions. And so that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles. Let's see. Disco Elysium Studios announced 2 rival studios. I guess technically all studios are rivals to each other, although we actually know it's 3 rival studios now. GTA Online film Grand Theft Hamlet hits US theaters next year. Interesting. FIFA and Konami team on the World Cup esports tournaments. Hotline Miami 2 has been delisted for the PS5 in Australia after being banned in 2015. That took them a while. A new lawsuit alleges that Ubisoft shared user data with Meta. That's old news. Yep, these are, I think, are all old stories at this point. Yeah. So of my macros, the GameDeveloper.com stories are still running into every single article being opened. So I need to work on that. There's so much I need to do. I didn't even mention that I installed KiCad and was playing around with that just to see how you could make a circuit board to upload a Gerber file, is what it's called, to JLB PCB and make a prototype PC board. Now, I'd have to say, as somebody who took 2 years of electronics in high school, the software was pleasantly easy enough for me to get into and not just immediately be confused and not know what I'm doing. I imagine all software has just moved towards the middle where it looks about the same and works about the same, mostly working and looking like Photoshop in a lot of cases. But yeah. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised on how much progress I made in one day. Of course, I didn't finish the project, and there's still a lot a lot to learn and a lot of things to try out if I was going to do anything. And the project I'm trying to experiment with here is just wasting my time anyways, but it's also very simple. I wanted to do a much more complicated concept, but I don't think my brain actually would work well enough to know how to do the electronics for it to work. The project was ideally to have a hot plate surface mount, just about 10 components, some LEDs and a battery connector, and then the rest of it is just going to be circuit traces. Where the more complicated one was going to have to potentially have a whole bunch of AND gates and maybe a timer circuit, if you can actually find a 555 timer chip these days. They are used in schematics, but they're not really used in modern times. I didn't want the project to get so complicated that you're potentially soldering on a Arduino or any kind of microcontroller, microprocessor. But yeah, the concept I had originally was probably more complicated. So yeah, that also has taken a lot of time because was playing with a circuit simulator on my phone to see if the thing would work or not. I just don't remember electronics, nor was I really taught DC logic level electronics anyways when I was in high school. The truth is, what I learned in high school is kind of useless because I was taught mostly AC stuff, how to repair TVs, how to do AM FM radios. That's one of the things I built. The idea of everything having a computer chip just wasn't really a thing, and the fact that there was an electronics class in general was definitely the thought that there would be jobs and careers in which you repaired in particular electronics, and that's just not really the case these days. Electronics have become incredibly disposable. It's wasteful, yes, but it's also almost impossible to fix electronics. So yeah, but yeah, I would recommend KiCad to anybody. It definitely is nowhere as it's not as difficult as something like Blender, where you probably do need to take a college level course to understand it. The only thing I would say in particular is I kind of wish KiCad by default would have just snapped objects to a grid and perhaps show me better scale of how big something is versus other things, because everything's in millimeters. Yeah. Anyways, let's hurry up and finish today's stream. It's been a rough one with me rambling. Let's go through all the new games that have come out. I'm gonna assume that if it is on the follow list, I've already made a YouTube short on it. I'm still in a bad position where I'm trying to upload the remainder of the YouTube shorts that I have before I make any new YouTube shorts and make the new macro program to make YouTube shorts faster. And that's stupid, really. What I should do is just draw a line and make a new folder, which would only take a second, and make a new macro to make the YouTube shorts that would save them into a different folder. That would solve everything. Suffice it to say, I'm not getting much accomplished these days, in part because I'm distracting myself, in part because I'm just actually getting external distractions. But it's certainly bad too, in that I'll start projects and then just kind of abandon them, and that's certainly not something I think anybody wants for themselves, is that they potentially would spend the rest of their life fully realizing and knowing that they're going to be a continuous starter and abandoner of projects. Sometimes it is logical and makes sense to abandon projects, and there you can be some learning in it, but sometimes it is just also people a way to waste your life away, and that, yeah. Like, suppose if you enjoy starting projects and don't really care about finishing them, if you can find enjoyment there and you're not gonna beat yourself up about it, then that's fine. Maybe that is, to get back to my rant at the beginning of the stream, maybe that's why so many people do have an odd love of working for other people, or working way too much in general, is that they have found a way to tie a sense of accomplishment to probably being exploited by somebody else, or otherwise being forced by situation to work for someone else. I really haven't felt that level of satisfaction, though. Yeah. I guess I did, since I'm sitting here and saying nothing else anyways, I did actually accomplish things over the weekend. Some of what I'm not accomplishing also is just me waiting for components to arrive and packages to be delivered, but yeah. Did actually assemble the bookcase. I didn't fail at that. Should feel happy about that level of success. I didn't break it in delivery, so I shouldn't feel bad about that. Sure, I failed to disassemble it and took the lazy solution of just keeping it. I did fail to measure, certainly, and check, see if the picture, if the color was the right color. So I should take that on, but I did succeed to some levels. I've been succeeding on several little projects in smaller steps. Yeah. Probably is a case that I, like many other people, tend to look only towards the final outcome, the last step of things, and tend not to pay attention to all of the success that it took to get to that last step. That was definitely not a lot of games that came out on Steam, but I'm going to assume that's just because it's a slow weekend. Okay, so we very quickly there, just as I was getting deep and insightful, ran into the end of the show. I can say on the third attempt today that I have 0 dropped frames, and no drop frames from render lag or skip frames to encoder lag after an hour and a half of streaming, and I have been keeping an eye on the download rate to YouTube, and it's been very high. So it does seem like I fixed the problem by just not doing Twitch anymore. So that's the way that's going to be. And with that, I guess that's all I really have to say. So that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.